Hello, everybody, and welcome to another adventure in history. I'm your host, Shane McInnes, and Fiddlia did the adventure hat summoning, so I figured I needed to go ahead and cut on. I I normally do the little adventure hatty thing before I cut on, if I can remember. Sometimes I don't always remember, but at that point, it was time to appear. So, hello everybody. I hope everybody's doing all right. So this is Adventures in History. I'm Shane. My camera's out of whack a little bit, and stuff is a little bit out of sorts. I've moved a lot of stuff around here in the room. I got a measuring tape out and measured the width of the room, and then put a little mark on the middle of the wall so that I could actually sit in the middle of the room. I kept wondering why the camera always seemed like it was slightly off to one side. And it turns out that the table wasn't actually centered on the back wall. It was about 3.5 or so inches off. So that, yeah, I had to move things around. So the show is Adventures in History, not Shane Moves Tables. My name is Shane. I teach history for a living at a college here where I live. And we talk about history stuff because I like talking about history. It's one of my things. And I like to do that in a way that people can approach, because history doesn't have to be boring or lame or stuck in some sort of, early 1900s British lecturing model. So we come here and we hang out and we make bad jokes and puns and we just have a good time. So I hope you all are having a good time. I guess you can't have too much of a good time in 2 minutes, but I'm a little out of it today. I've been a little burned out, so I actually took today off so that I could get work done. And I know that seems weird, but if I can be in my own element and sit down and focus and not have other people kind of talking at me, I can actually get a lot more stuff done. So I took the morning off and then actually did work all morning. So I've done work, but it hasn't been at work. Self-care is not weird. Yeah, that's true, Vern. And I actually spoke with my wife today. We went on a walk for the first time in a while. The weather here is so weird. It will be summer weather one day and then winter weather the next day. It's getting to the point where the seasons are just basically playing Yahtzee, and you never really know when it's going to turn up. There's a small potential that we might have another freeze, which is crazy. It's April now, so you're not supposed to have freezes in April, but it is what it is. But anyway, we went out and walked, and I shared that I had made some decisions about how I needed to take more ownership of mental health, since other entities were not going to be responsible for that. I needed to be in the driver's seat of that and stop waiting for things to happen and then change what I could. So there's progress being made, and I'm already feeling better about it, but I just got to make it happen, right? So, but that being said, this might be the last time you all get to see the Giganto mug for a while, because I don't really like drinking hot tea when it's hot outside, so it's a bit chilly, and the wind was blowing really, really hard. So it's definitely tea time. So anyway, so what are we doing tonight? Well, last stream, we had this whole talk about Julius Caesar and who he was and what he did. And at the end of it, well, he died. He got murdered. And that's going to throw the Roman world into a lot of chaos. And for about the next decade or so, there's going to be kind of ongoing civil wars. And so we're going to pick up tonight talking about this guy, Octavian, and how he plays into sort of the larger picture of this whole thing. But as always, before we get off rolling, we do want to check in with a couple of things. We are almost halfway to our goal here. We are 448 500 followers, getting towards History of Middle Earth Part 4. I have considered maybe opening up another community goal for what would be History of Middle Earth Part 5. I don't know if I'm going to do that quite yet. I know that there are a lot of people that were hoping to get some viewer request episodes in. We do have 3 viewer request episodes lined up, and getting us around to those is going to, normally take some time. We only usually do those every other week. I have a thought that since one of those was mostly based around showing photographs of places that I've traveled to, that it might be actually easier to put one of those together. And I started working on that and then realized, oh no, oh no, there's a lot of work that would go into that, because I'd want to go through all of my photos and pick the ones that are the best examples of things and make sure that I have things organized in a way that makes sense. So there's going to be some prep work involved in that. I thought, I can just throw that together and we can do that a couple of days ago on Tuesday. But no. That might happen not day after tomorrow, but the following Saturday. We do have a viewer request coming up on Tuesday. That's a more traditional viewer request, one that the viewers voted on, for History of Archaeology. And next week we will leave Rome, and we won't talk about Rome again for a little while, because I know that we've been talking about Rome a lot lately. But we are almost around to the next phase of history, so we will move on from this part of the world, and we will move over to other parts of the world. Specifically, we're going to go over here and talk about this little part of the world, Korea, next Thursday, which I'm really excited about, because I like talking about Korean history, and I don't think most people get that in school. Then the week after that, we're actually going to go over and hang out in the New World. And we're going to talk about groups of people over here in Central and South America that are organizing, because if we're covering history chronologically, we've got to cover everything that's happening, which is becoming a bit of a multi-headed Hydra problem, but we'll make our way through it as we go. All right, so we're about to kick off, as always. I should say welcome. Welcome, Fid. Thanks for coming by. Hey, Moose. What's up? Thanks, by the way, for all of the stuff that you all do in helping promote the channel. I frequently find myself going into other streamers' channels and finding my friends who have already started talking about stuff that's going on. So I appreciate that. I really do. I think that one of the strengths of our community is that we actually really are a community. And I'm not trying to say that to be hokey or suck up to you all. But we've got good friendships here. And I think that that is a more organic way of growing than me necessarily blasting social media with, hey, come check out the channel. And I tried that, and it just didn't really work very well for me. So, but I appreciate that. So, hey, Moose. Hey, Vern, welcome. That's spring in New York. Yeah, you all actually get definable seasons, though. We sort of have like hot and not so hot. Hey, KP, welcome. Okay, so as always, as we go through, please feel free to ask questions, make comments, divert us off on tangents, have all of the crazy things that we always have. Hey, Mortest, what's up? It's still snowing there. Good gravy. That's cool, though. I mean, I actually don't mind the cold weather. My wife, on the other hand, is rather averse to cold weather and would not like it still snowing right now. She, in fact, does not like very much the cold snap that we're having right now. So you don't really have a spring. It's just winter and summer overlapped. Well, that's what we get, but we have the added bonus of tornadoes. We've already had 3 tornado warnings in the area since the beginning of March. So it's almost a weekly occurrence here that we get tornadoes now. New York's bravest is outside, and you want to know why. Okay, I hope that everything is all right, Vern, and be careful. Okay, so let's do some talking. We're going to pick up more or less where we left off, but if you weren't here last week, don't worry. Everything that we need is going to be self-contained. We're going to be talking about this guy named Octavian, and he, as a young man, looks like this. This is a very young statue of Octavian, and he is going to be sort of thrust into the Roman world at a very, very young age, and is going to excel. And I will note, before we go too much further, it was really hard for me to narrow down what I wanted to talk about when we were talking about this guy, because just to be honest, I've done a lot of research on this guy. I did basically my senior exit paper for my undergraduate degree on this guy and the reforms that he did. And I was speaking with my wife, and she's like, "Oh, just do the highlights." I'm like, this guy's kind of like a living highlight reel. Everything that he does is pretty important and has really big, lasting repercussions. And I know that Julius Caesar is probably the more famous of the two when you compare Julius Caesar and then Caesar Augustus, but I promise you that Caesar Augustus is much more important in the long run. He's the one that made it work. Okay, so this is Octavian, and by the way, Octavian and Augustus are the same guy. We'll talk about all of the name changes and titles and stuff as we go. So Caesar is murdered. This is on the 15th of March in 44 BC, and into the mix gets thrown this kid named Octavian. So who is this guy? Well, first off, he's another one of these people that was born into the right families. His father, where he gets his namesake Octavian, is part of a family called the Octavi, who were originally plebeians, and they lived just north of the city of Rome in a region right around in here. And because of their support for Caesar and his military options, and especially their financial support, his family, the Octavi were bankers. Caesar raises the Octavi to patrician status, so they get a social bump just by being in the right circle. His mother was a lady named Atia Balbus. She was in the right family as well. Atia was Caesar's niece. Atia's mother was Caesar's sister. So this is Julius Caesar's sister. And Atia's father was a cousin of Pompey. So Pompey Magnus, a really important Roman general that had a lot of political power as well. So Octavian has the connections on both sides. He's got the financial support of Caesar from his father's side, and the elevation to patrician status from his father's side. But he actually does have the blood of Caesar from his mother's side, and he's connected to Pompey and a lot of Pompey's political allies, because remember at this period of time, or if you weren't here before, at this time there are you had your social classes. Your plebeians were the lower class and patricians were the upper class. But you also had these political blocks called optimates, who were the people that really wanted the Senate to run things. They were the conservative group that wanted to preserve the old Romanness of Rome. And then you had the populares, who are the people that were using popular support, mostly from lower class people and veterans and military officers, to try to mobilize masses to get political reform done. So Octavian is in an interesting position because he has both plebeian and patrician connections, but he also has populare and optimate connections. So he's literally sitting in the quadrants of all of the big power players. And this is something that he's going to be able to use to his benefit, because when he wants to, he can sort of reach into any of these big bag of tricks. So, of course, this makes Julius Caesar his great uncle. His father, who's also named Octavian, by the way, Gaius Octavian, his father is going to die when he's 4 years old. And this is going to be a pretty weird scenario, because as a 4-year-old, you really weren't going to be able to have much of any rights. The way that the Roman legal system worked is that you effectively had to be attached to an older male relative. And that's going to put Octavian in a weird position because, well, the older male relatives that sort of are supposed to take over his care aren't really that good at it. And his mom is going to even step in. His mom's name, again, is Atia. She's going to step in and do a lot of work with education. She's going to help him learn Greek and Latin. She's going to make sure that he gets into oratory classes. So one of the great things about the Roman world, especially if you were in the upper class, you needed to be able to make a good speech. Speeches were big and important things. You know, this is before you had blogs or Twitter and people actually had to communicate verbally. So you had to get in the right circles, and to do that, you needed to be able to make good speeches. You had to really sway the masses. A lot of our sort of pop cultural references, like if you've ever seen the big guy get up before the battle and give the speech, we don't see that very much anymore in real life. I hope your boss doesn't get up and give you big motivational speeches and everybody then cheer and clap at the end. I've always found those very hollow. But to Romans, those were a really, really big deal. And that sort of hung around in our culture a little bit. So when he was a little bit older, somewhere between 5 and 6, his mom recognized that not having a sort of direct male figure in his life was going to be difficult, and she also needed some political support for some of the stuff that she was trying to get to do. Women, by the way, also did not have a lot of rights on their own. They were attached to an older male relative. So even if you had been a married woman, if your husband died, your sort of legal guardianship transferred back to an older brother or your father or maybe an uncle. So Atia remarries, and the guy that she marries seems to, according to the historical sources, actually be a pretty good guy, and seems to kind of dote on Octavian and does a pretty good job of raising this kid and gets him through all of the right, kind of proper circles for a kid of his status. And there's going to be a moment when Octavian is 11, so still just a little kid, where his grandmother dies. And his grandmother, again, is, Julius Caesar's sister. So he, as Octavian, this 11-year-old kid, gives the funeral speech. And this was a really, really big deal. The speeches at your funeral were a huge part. You wanted somebody to get up and tell all of the stories of your family, all of the people that you were related to, and great deeds of their lives and accomplishments. And you sort of started all the way back that you could go, the furthest reaches, and you talk about, oh, we are from this family that goes all the way back to like the Trojan War, and we have all these people in our family, and this guy was consul 4 times, and this guy was a governor of these provinces, and this guy won a triumph because of this battle, and you give all of this lineage kind of stuff. And as an 11-year-old kid, here's Octavian giving this big speech and having all of this stuff memorized, and being his sister's funeral, Julius Caesar is there. And he kind of looks at this kid and he's like, that kid's got something. He's got that something. And at this point, Julius Caesar is basically going to take Octavian under his wing. And will basically shepherd him through the rest of his early life. Most notably, he gets Octavian elected into a priesthood at the age of 15. So at 15, you sort of became a man in Roman circles. You got to wear the toga of the man. And as soon as that happened, Caesar gets him elected into a priesthood. So this kid's 15 and already has an elected religious office inside of the Roman Republic. That's a pretty big deal. I like the cut of his jib. KP, do you know where that statement comes from? If you don't, I'm going to say it anyway. That's one of my favorite statements. The cut of his jib. So their jib is referring to a sail on a multi-sailed ship. And the particular statement comes from the fact that different countries would build their ships differently. So the French would build their ships one way, and the Spanish and the English would build their ships certain ways, and the Dutch and the Portuguese would build their ships certain ways. And you could look at the jib sail and get a pretty good idea of what sort of country the people on that ship were from. So you didn't even necessarily have to see the colors that they were flying. You could just look at their jib. And you go, I like the cut of that guy's jib, because you're friendly with the country from whom those people are sailing or representing. So there's the history of that statement. I love the history of idioms and little things like that. I know I'm also a giant nerd, but I don't think I really have to convince anybody of anything else, by the way, at this point. So there's the cut of your jib story. There's a free random history fact for you. Okay, so jibber jabber. Vern, I hope all is well and that New York's finest are now exiting the premises. So Caesar is going to take this kid under his wing. When Caesar does stuff, he's going to make sure that Octavian is with him. When Caesar oversees public events, he's the sponsor of games or plays or competitions or various anything. If there's a festival that Caesar is sponsoring, he makes sure that when he appears, he's got Octavian with him, kind of arm around the shoulder, like, hey, here's me, and hey, check out this wunderkind that is going to be a really big guy one day. No smoke detected, and they are gone. Or they're selling calendars. We'll just hope for the calendars. Are they Julian calendars? They probably are Gregorian calendars, but anyway, Julius Caesar fixed the calendar. Anyway, so when Caesar celebrates his triumphs, these are one of the biggest celebrations that Romans can do. That you can get. One of the highest kind of awarded honors of a military officer was to have the triumph. You get to parade through the city of Rome, and everybody gets to throw honor upon you, and you get to show off all of the glory that you have. Well, when Caesar's participating in his triumphs, guess who's right by him? This guy, this little kid, Octavian, who by this time is, 17, getting kind of gangly. And it's time for Octavian to get some military experience, because that's the right thing to do if you're that age. You go and you fight, and you go get some military experience, and you show that you're a good Roman by protecting the Roman interest. So Caesar is actually going to bring Octavian over here to Hispania. If you'll remember, or if you don't know, that the Romans were in the process of trying to conquer Spain, and they had taken sort of this L-shaped area right here that's green, and this sort of highland region was still a little unstable, and they were still having to fight over there. So Caesar goes over with some legions to mop up some resistance, and he brings out Octavian. Now, Octavian doesn't actually do very much fighting at this point. He's actually having some health issues, and but he proves himself to be a capable individual, a wise kid, a guy that's got a good head on his shoulders. Everyone tries to conquer Spain, We'll talk about that a little bit more later. And when Caesar gets home from Spain, he's going to do something kind of sneaky, and he doesn't really tell anybody about this. This is sort of the brilliance of Caesar. He changed his will, and the way that you did wills if you were a big person in the Roman world was to write your will and have it witnessed, and then you would deposit that in the vault of the Temple of Vesta. The sacred Temple of Vesta was where you might also find the Vestal Virgins, who were some of the highest priestess positions within the Roman religious structure. This is why nobody expects a Spanish Inquisition. They are usually the ones getting attacked. That's not always the case, but it does seem to be fairly common for Spain to get attacked. How they made it through both world wars the way that they did is still sort of kind of a surprise to me. Anyway, so Caesar changes his will, and unbeknownst to many, many people, he is going to name Octavian as his heir and go through the formal process of adoption. And I should note here that Roman adoption was actually a fairly different situation than modern adoption. In the Roman world, you would fill out paperwork and things of this nature, and you would have to go through a formal process with the legal system. But also, this was a truly religious ceremony as well. You would make this known at temples, and you would bring your adopted family member into your home, and there would be a religious ceremony where you would introduce this person to the manes of your family. A mane was a household spirit that protected your domicile and your family. And you would basically make it known to the gods that this person was to be under the protection of this group of spirits. So adoption was a full sort of 360-degree concept. And in the Roman world, it was completely expected that at that point, when you changed your name, your blood was the same. You know, today we know that it didn't really work that way, and it doesn't really work that way. Like, if we're just speaking of pure genetics here. But in the Roman world, there were no differences. You were treated and expected to be, in all legal circumstances, exactly like a blood relative. And it also helps that, Octavian was already a blood relative of Caesar, but this guy is going to be considered a straight up actual son, but not quite yet. So when Caesar's doing all of this stuff, and I forgot to even mention this, Octavian, by the way, is born on September 23rd of 63 BC. So by the time we get to 44 BC, he is 19. And in 44, Julius Caesar, hey, Bloss, what's up? Welcome. All hail Caesar. We're getting there. We're getting pretty close. Julius Caesar's still alive at the moment. So Julius Caesar is here, but he's building up troops over here in Greece, especially in this region right here, because Julius Caesar wanted to attack into Parthia, and he wanted to attack Parthia partially to regain sort of the honor of Rome that it had lost at the Battle of Carrhae, when the Parthians had beaten the mess out of the Romans and humiliated them. And who is he going to send over to Greece to be his second in command? The particular position is called Master of Horse, the Magister Militum, the person who's going to be your second-hand man when you go off to fight your battles. Of course, it's Octavian. So Octavian wasn't in Rome when the assassination happens. And there has been all sorts of speculation as to whether or not Caesar knew or expected his murder and sent Octavian over to Macedonia, surrounded by troops loyal to Caesar, note, because Julius Caesar expected something to happen. Now, we can't, of course, say we don't know. We can say we don't know. We can't say that we do know for certain. But Caesar was a smart dude, and he knew that the water was getting pretty hot, and it would not be above him to do something just like this. But in 44 BC, there is word that reaches Octavian over here where he's stationed in Macedonia. Beware the Ides. Correct, man. Like, if you have people telling you, hey, you're probably going to get stabbed, you should probably not do that. You might want to maybe take your bodyguards with you. Don't be the big head and go, no, I'm invincible. I'm invincible. Speaking of invincible, if you haven't read the comic book Invincible, you should go read the comic book. But if you haven't read the comic book and you're not completely interested in the comic book, Amazon has just recently started an animated Invincible cartoon. Hey, Joe, what's up? Welcome. Brittany and I watched the first 3 episodes of it last night, and it's quite good. Be warned, it is M for mature, even though the animation style looks very happy-go-lucky. Things get dark real quick, like. So, if you're interested in watching a superhero comic that's not really, like, spandexy, it's a lot more like, a lighthearted story about how family exists in tension. That's the sort of the core of the story, but superpowers and aliens and stuff get thrown on top of that. So it's a good story. Some pretty bad things happen to that kid, indeed. Joe, have you read the comic? I don't want to spoil anything for either the comic or the show, but the comic book is one of my favorite superhero comics ever. And I've read I don't even want to guess how many comic books that I've read. Tens of thousands, maybe. I don't know. Lots. And I love Invincible comic. One of my favorites. I was very excited to hear that they were making a show about it. And the show actually is pretty good. Ryan Ottley, yes. Ottley is a great artist. And I've never actually met him in person, but everybody that I've heard talking about him has said the same thing, that he's a pretty cool guy. So I really loved his art on that comic, and it just got better as it went. Anyway, so there's okay. So getting this back to Roman, invincible is a Latin word. The Vinci. I came, I saw, I conquered. So invincible means unconquerable. So now we're getting back to Rome, and we can... So when the assassination happens, Caesar's will gets brought out of the Temple of Vesta. It is read to the public. It is made known that Octavian had been adopted as his son, and that Caesar had left to Octavian 2/3 of his fortune, which was gigantic, all of his honorarium titles, all of his relationships between patron and client. Basically, Octavian was expected to step directly into Caesar's shoes. And you go, well, what happened to the other third of the money? The other third of the money was actually distributed to the people, because Julius Caesar basically gave everybody in Rome something like what would be today, like $20-25, and gave a gigantic amount of money set aside for his funeral, where everybody in Rome basically got to feast for a week. That's crazy, but he blew it out. He wanted everybody to remember him, and it really did work. So here's Octavian. He's on the battlefield. He's here with his army, a lot of people that are very big with Caesar. And he gets word that Caesar is dead. Not only does he get word that Caesar is dead, he also gets word of the adoption, and he's going to change his name. He's going to name himself Gaius Julius Caesar Octavianus. So he's going to keep his original sort of gens name of Octavi, but he's going to go Gaius Julius Caesar. And at that point, people start calling him Caesar to his face. Now, I will continue to call him Octavian because it is easier for us, as we are discussing, to distinguish Octavian from Caesar, referring to Julius Caesar, if I don't start calling Octavian Caesar as well. But you should know that at this point, everybody calls him Caesar to his face. So what's going to happen? Well, he starts going back to Italy. And there are a lot of people that were sort of advisors in the military and people that were Caesar's kind of advisors in the Roman world that were like, you don't want to be over here right now, man. You need to stay where you are. Caesar goes to Alexandria. Confusion, right? But he refuses. He's like, nope, they've killed my father. And he's really playing into this. He's like, they have killed my father. I'm going to go get revenge. But there is a person standing in his way. And that person is this guy. This is Mark Antony. So if we call Shane Caesar, that will be their official name. You can call me Caesar if you want to. I don't earn that. I have not done anything worthy of that, but you can call me Caesar if you want to. If you want to. So this is Mark Antony. And just to give a brief recap of Mark Antony, Antony was Caesar's right-hand man for a long time. When Caesar was out at war, Antony was right there by his side. When Caesar was invading Egypt, he chose Antony to leave in charge of Italy to cover his back. And Antony really started feeling like maybe he was supposed to be the next Caesar. And Antony had basically managed to weasel his way into the position of leadership in Rome upon the death of Caesar. His name really is Mark. Such a white person name. Yeah, I mean, you could call him Marcus Antonius if you want to. That would be more Latin-y sounding if you want. You can call me Al. Octavian IV Maximus Populi, political yard sign. Right? Vote for me. Mark led the legion known as the Funky Bunch, right? Yes. Marcius Mark and the Funkiest Bunches. You could call me Putin. Putting his beer in my mouth. Okay. Stay thirsty, my friends. Anyway, so Antony was in charge of Rome after the death of Caesar, and he had done only as much vengeance as he felt like he needed to pacify Caesar's most violent followers. So Antony had pushed out some of the senators in the sort of central factor of the assassination plot, but others that were more peripherally attached to the assassination plot, he kind of just let them go. And when Octavian starts marching his way towards Rome, one of the things that he sends word to Antony is, if you're running Rome right now, I want my money. You need to release my money to me. Caesar had left Octavian 2/3 of his fortune, and Octavian would love to have that because he could then give bonuses to all of his army soldiers to more firmly solidify the friendship between them and himself. They were following him because love of Caesar and because Caesar had told them to, but a little money now and then smooths over a lot of stuff. And Antony's like, we need to have this will examined. I don't know if this is legitimate or not. And Octavian's like, dude, it literally came out of the temple. It's legit. Give me my money. And Antony's like, not gonna do that. Not gonna do that. So Octavian starts to move into Italy, and he's bringing with him a lot of his soldiers, and a lot of people are starting to realize that there is a bit of tension between these two groups. The supporters of Antony, who thought he should take over after Caesar, and those who are actually following Caesar's will, who think that Octavian should be in charge. No, sir, I don't like it. Well, it gets really nasty because Antony starts saying some really horrible things to try to smear Octavian's reputation. For example, he says that one of the reasons Octavian did so well in Spain was that he had sold himself as a male prostitute to the governor of Spain for 300,000 sesterces, which was a fairly sizable chunk of change. He also said that the only reason Octavian had gotten into Caesar's good graces is because of an inappropriate relationship where Octavian would basically give himself to Caesar. And this was pretty clearly propaganda. It was basically done to try to besmirch Octavian's name. And so Octavian decides, well, if you're going to fight fire, you fight fire with fire. And Octavian reaches out to one of his father/uncle's enemies, this guy named Cicero. Cicero had been... Yeah, so he starts calling him a hoe, basically. Particularly here, a man-hoe. If there needs to be a distinction, I don't know if there needs to be a distinction. So Cicero starts having all of these public meetings where he starts talking about how bad Antony is. And Cicero was the greatest orator in all of Rome at the time and had an amazing amount of clout. And when he starts talking about how bad Antony is, it really starts to sway public opinion. So it gets to the point where Octavian is going to decide that he can't just bully Antony out. He's going to have some sort of leverage. So he runs for consul. He's 20 years old at this point. A 20-year-old. He had never been an aedile. He had never been a quaestor. He had never been a praetor. He had not gone down the proper order of things, the cursus honorum, the honorable path of getting elected to the lower offices. He's just like, if I'm going to have to deal with Antony, I need imperium, the power over life and death, the power. No, he doesn't even have a beard at this point. So he runs for consul and he says, hey, if you love Caesar and if you love his memory, vote for me. And he gets elected consul at the age of 20. And at that point, he outranks Antony. And he's like, all right, punk, you're now going to do what I tell you to do. And Antony is not pleased with this at all. At all. Octavian gets his money. He gets power to command troops. And Antony gets pissed off. So what are they to do? Well, Octavian realizes that he needs help. He needs somebody to sort of balance the scales, if you will, towards his direction. If he and Antony were going head to head, the forces would be basically evenly split. But if he being Octavian, could figure out a way to change the dynamic a little bit, this would throw Antony off the high horse. Mark laughed as he took the last parking space, only to find out that it belonged to his boss. That's not too far from the truth. Okay, so Octavian is going to reach out to one of Caesar's biggest political supporters, and that guy's name was Lepidus. And here is Lepidus here. And I'm typing Lepidus so that you can look at it when we switch back here. So Lepidus, he was a kind of an up-and-coming face in the world at the time, but he was widely known. He had a lot of the credentials that you would need. He was part of the right families and ran in the right circles. And Octavian is going to use Lepidus to work out a power-sharing deal between himself, Lepidus, and Antony. Did Octavian run unopposed, or did Mark Antony run against him, or has consul lost? A lot of people ran for consul. Antony is going to end up kind of realizing that he's going to lose if he runs and doesn't. But he wasn't running unopposed. There were very few situations where people ran unopposed for consul. Even if, and this was sort of a thing that Romans did, even if they knew somebody was kind of a shoo-in, they would very frequently have somebody stand as an opponent specifically so that they could have the kind of back and forth. And you might even get one of your friends to run against you to kind of give you a person to contrast yourself against, so that you got to do the public speeches. You got to have the public debates. So there are situations where people do run unopposed for consul, and there are situations where people, especially at this point in the Republic, had effectively demanded consul be given to them, and then people voted them in. But I mean, he won fair and square. It doesn't. There's not any big corruption charges or bribery charges. It just seems like people really loved Julius Caesar, which tends to be the case here. So what we've got is the second triumvirate. I don't know why I hit the caps locks there. Second triumvirate, which is Octavian, Lepidus, and Antony. So these three guys are going to be sort of the three-headed deity that runs Rome. And they're going to break up the territory that they control by provincial lines. And what's interesting about this, in the first triumvirate that existed between Crassus, Pompey, and Julius Caesar, it was an informal arrangement between the three of them to use their power to influence things. But Octavian had learned lessons from watching Caesar do stuff and fail. And Octavian actually brings this to the plebeian council and has the plebeian council effectively ratify this arrangement where these three guys are going to be elected to kind of run Rome as a three-headed leadership instead of just the two consuls. So then you have to figure out who's going to share the power and how this is going to get broken up. Okay, well, this is where things get crazy. Antony basically demands that he get the east. So he's going to take Egypt and Syria and Cilicia province over here, and this is going to be his world. And Caesar, I'm sorry, no, I'm calling him Caesar. Octavian is going to kind of get this middle territory right here, and Spain. Hey, Viscera, what's up? Welcome. And Lepidus is going to get kind of cut out and gets northern Africa and the islands here. Lepidus is not really happy with the arrangement. He had done this thinking that he was going to get Italy and Gaul and Spain, but Octavian wasn't going to give up the city of Rome. He was too smart for that. So you've got this unstable power balance right off the bat. And it's going to get worse, because when Antony gets down here to Egypt, well, guess who he meets? And you probably already know the answer to this question if you've been around the movie world for a while. He meets this young lady. This is Cleopatra VII, who was the dynastic leader of the Ptolemaic Empire. So at this point, Rome was more like a confederation, sort of, The political fiction is that they were still a republic, and they were still electing consuls. One of the three were almost always going to be consul for the whole period that they're in charge. They're usually going to let some other person be consul, just kind of as a token gesture, but they're going to be kind of making sure that their people get elected by using their support. So the governors of the provinces are still being elected as praetors, but the people that the triumvirate wants are getting in. The people that are getting into the lower level positions in the Roman world are the people that they want to get in. So the machine is still running, but the triumvirate still very much has a thumb on the scale, if you will. So yes, this is that Ptolemy woman, as Vern so accurately pointed out. So this is Cleopatra. And Antony and Cleopatra are going to hit it off. And right off the bat, they're going to end up in a bit of a discussion. Now, it turns out that when Julius Caesar, was down in Egypt in previous times, he and Cleopatra had been an item. And Cleopatra had a son. And this particular kid, she named Caesarion, because she claimed that Caesar was his father. Caesarion, by the way, we don't have a lot of good pictures of, but I do have this one. This is him on the wall of a temple here, and this is Cleopatra, his mother, behind him, kind of watching over his back. So how is this going to complicate the mix? Well, so here's the deal. Now we have the potential direct heir of Caesar, who might be his actual son. Does that mean he's the guy that should take over? Well, we also have Antony, who's down there kind of chafing at the fact that this guy is potentially Caesar's direct son, because that would put him, Caesarion, a little bit over Antony as a potential leader of Rome, if it came to that. But here's the thing, Caesarion was still very young at that point, so Antony's going to be like his protective father, and he makes sure very quickly that he and Cleopatra have kids of their own, so that he can, if needs be, kind of Caesarion and get rid of him if that comes to the point, and his own children, they have twins, could take over in the case of all of this stuff. But the plot is getting thick here because nobody really knows who's going to be in charge. Antony is clearly the antagonizer and is really going to be pushing at trying to take over by himself. But Octavian is sort of sitting in the driver's seat. And this is going to get really nasty because the first thing that they decide to do is kill all of the assassins. And they start putting out lists, and everybody that's on these lists had to be basically declared an enemy of Rome, and they're going to kill all of these political enemies. And the reason I said that it gets nasty is because they start using these lists of proscriptions to settle personal vendettas. Like, Antony was so mad at Cicero for saying the horrible things that Cicero had said about Antony that Antony gets Cicero killed. So bye-bye, Cicero. Hey, Metran, welcome. Did the Uno reverse card on the assassins there? Right. Like, oh, we're going to kill you. Huh? Hey, I am Batbird. I keep thinking of the C-section procedure when I hear that name. LOL. Is that my fault? No. It's absolutely not your fault. The word is the same. We spoke about this a little bit in last stream, but the word Caesarion was actually the process. And they, in the Roman world, had used that term to mean that procedure for a really, really long time. The procedure that we know today as the Caesarian section is not named after Julius Caesar. The theory is that Caesar might have the name Caesar because he was born by Caesarean section. So that word Caesarean was being used prior to Julius Caesar being born in 100 BC. So yes, it is the same word, but it does not directly come from Julius Caesar himself. Who assassinates the assassins? Oh boy, here we go, kill it again, right? He fell into my knife. He fell into my knife 15 times. So yeah, so they're going to start killing folks. Here we go, killing again. And the reason they're killing some of these political people, yeah, no worries. If there's ever situations like that, feel free to ask questions. I'm a veritable fount of weird and somewhat useless knowledge like that. So the reason they're doing a lot of this is because Rome as a country was effectively broke at this point. They had gone through almost 200 straight years of war. Everybody was blown out, tired from having to continue perpetual wars along the border. The money that was there was being used to bribe people and keep the gears flowing. So by killing some of these rich people with prescriptions, the triumvirate was able to kill them. Risu Degu! Dun 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 dun! Dun 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 dun! Hey Risu Degu, welcome. And thank you for the follow, and welcome to the adventure. And that brings us one follower closer to our goal of another History of Middle-earth stream. Hey, Cave, what's up? Welcome. You're a teacher. None of your knowledge is useless. Of varying degrees of usefulness. How about that? Not sure I didn't have that clicked yet. No worries. I honestly think that Twitch sometimes unfollows people because I know for a fact that I have followed some people only to find out that I'm not actually following them later. Not much, just woke up from a nap and having a short discussion with someone about how Moana and LOTR have a lot in common. I've never seen Moana, so I don't know if I could participate in that discussion. There we go. Yeah, go follow the Cave Geek. He's a cool guy. I hang out in his channel a lot. He's a good friend and a good person and does awesome art. You should go give him a follow. Because I said so. Not because I said so, but because you'll appreciate it. Anyway, so they're going to kill these people because when they declare them enemies of Rome, they can then kill them and, what's interesting, confiscate their stuff, including confiscate their money. And they're building this money pit so that they can put together an army to go kill the rest of the senators that were assassins, because a lot of those senators had run to various parts of the Roman world and were putting together armies of their own, especially over in Greece. So, where are we going? Are there baskets?
Camels, horses,
Emmy!
an armed escort, provisions,
Desert vehicles and tanks.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Emmy. Much appreciated. Also, everybody go follow Emmy, who has a delightful stream and does art of varying sorts, including graphics design, logos stuff, design work for characters and things of that nature, pinups kind of stuff. Really cool. Good music. Has a big honking dog called Chopper that is just a big furry ball of fluff. Is a delightful streamer. Go give Emmy a follow. And she would tell you that her place is a cool place to be, and I would back that up. Anyway, so you go kill all these people, you take their money, and you use that to fund an army so that you can go kill the rest of the people. And in the midst of this, because Octavian is sitting in Rome, he has something very interesting done. He approaches the Senate and he's like, look, Caesar was a special kind of guy. And they're like, yeah. And let's pause here to remind ourselves that prior to his death, Julius Caesar had put some 400 senators into the Senate that were his direct buddies. And he goes to the Senate, Octavian does, and says, wouldn't it be interesting if we could do something that would honor Caesar after he's dead? And they go, yeah, that would be great. We could make a statue of him and put it up in the forum, or we could dedicate a building to him. And Caesar's like, that would be great. That would be great. And then Octavian goes, what if we declared him a god? And they were like, oh, dude, that would be cool. We could totally do that. And they did. So Julius Caesar got declared a god. And this was a pretty interesting move here, because when Julius Caesar became Divius Julius Caesar, or the divine Julius Caesar, that made Augustus, wait for it, the son of a god. And Julius Caesar being a god means that his adopted son gets to share in some of that glory, and Octavian begins to use the title Divius Filius, or the son of the divine. It's a bit of an ego move. Yeah, total power move there. Yeah, right. The original GoFundMe. Oh man, that's horrible. You're trying to get your stream viewers to declare you a god. No luck yet. Making people gods make up for any accidental stabbings. Hey man, I know you're dead and all, and I feel real bad about stabbing you, so we're going to posthumously declare you to be a god if that's okay. Oh, geez Louise. That is absolutely crazy. And I just realized that I should have put a picture in the photo list, and I didn't do it. So let me see if I can manage to do two things at once by talk and adding a picture to the list at the same time. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this or not, and I'm not being sarcastic. We all know that I can't talk and type at the same time. So, okay. We now have Divius Filius Octavianus, who's the son of the divine, and things are going nasty with everybody else. The sound you hear is the Egyptian pharaohs rolling their eyes, like, dude, we've been doing that for ever. Son of the god thing. We kind of, we've got that. No problem here. Put this over here, paste. Okay, cool. Rename you 12 Temple. Okay, cool. I've added that. Now let's see if it actually works. Okay, so the triumvirate goes after the bad guys, and it rounds up the rest of the assassins, especially that most traitorous of them all, Brutus. And over in Macedonia, they killed Brutus and the last of the assassins. Some of the senators get away in the mess, and they flee over to northern Africa, but Lepidus wipes them up. And at this point, there's a big debate over whether or not the army gets to go on retirement. I'm falling behind in the chat here. At the same time, yes. Henry didn't even get stabbed as that much. You assume Octavian doesn't know about Caesar's Cleopatra. Oh no, Octavian knew about Caesarion, and there were a lot of people inside of his kind of inner cadre of supporters that were like, you need to assassinate that kid down in Egypt. And he was like, I will not. I am the adopted son. Well, he didn't actually say adopted. He said, I am the son of Caesar. I have the document to prove it. I am the son. I don't need the word of some Ptolemaic Greek Egyptian lady telling me that her son is actually the son of Caesar. I have the blood of Caesar in me because he himself chose me. I have the proof. I don't need that. I don't need to go kill that guy. It would just make Antony angrier. Freaking Judas. Yeah. So they split up the empire, and they have this issue of what to do with the troops, because Octavian is really interested in making peace. But because of the way they had divided the empire, Octavian can't put his soldiers anywhere really except for Italy. And this is going to be a problem because Italy was already overcrowded. And because of some of the previous legal changes, everybody living in Italy was a Roman citizen. So where are you going to put thousands of soldiers? Where are you going to find land to give thousands of soldiers land in Italy, which is already crowded when you already have all these citizens? So Octavian has a choice. Does he make the army upset by not giving them the land that they were due? Or does he make people inside of Italy upset by taking their land and giving it to soldiers? In the ancient world, when in doubt, keep the army happy. And that's what Octavian does. He tries to selectively maneuver the land away from people that are not really his friends, and gives a lot of owned land to the veterans as their sort of exit bonuses. But this makes a lot of rich people in Italy real hacked off. Wait, does that mean Caesarion or Ptolemy could be a double godly? He could be. He's god in multiple pantheons, right? So there are a lot of people inside of Italy that get really upset at this move of Octavian, including, and this is great, Antony's own family. At this point, Caesar is going to also divorce his wife, who happened to be one of Antony's relatives, and sends her back to Antony's sister, who was her mom. And because of this land deal, there were a lot of angry people already at Octavian. So Antony's family tries to rebel against Octavian inside of Italy. It doesn't go so great. Octavian has a ton of military support inside of Italy. And Antony sort of sees this as his moment. He's like, we can go now? And so Antony leaves Egypt with a big old army and gets up to Italy, and he's gonna show Octavian what's what. You can't steal land from these people. And Octavian's like, you don't want to fight me, go back. And there's a little bit of skirmishing, and then Antony goes, yeah, I should go back. Because Italy at that point was full of Octavian's supporters, including very well-seasoned troops. Supporting the veterans sounds like a good idea. Yeah, it's a good idea, period. And maybe we should take a page out of that book in the United States, because we don't do nearly as much to help those people as we should. Soapbox moment, but accurate statement. So the Italy scenario calms down, but when all of this is going on, player 4 has entered the game. And player 4 is this guy. Oh, doong, doong. And you go, who the devil is that? Well, that is a guy named Sextus Pompey. And you go, what the devil is that? That I don't want to know what that sounds like. Well, that's Pompey's son. This is Pompey Magnus, Pompey the Great. His son was still alive and had taken over the island of Sicily here and had a lot of soldiers under his command, and decides in the middle of this this kind of craziness that it might be a good time to Sextus Pompey. Yep, indeed. So it might be a good time to get revenge of his own. Maybe go kill Octavian because of all of the stuff that had happened with Julius Caesar and Pompey. And so there's a big rebellion, and there's a big war over how to handle this stuff, and Octavian gets involved, and Antony gets involved, and Lepidus gets involved. And between the three triumvirs, Sextus Pompey gets wrecked pretty bad. And this is when Lepidus is going to sort of make his move. He's like, okay, well, we killed him, and I'm going to get Sicily. Sicily has always been connected to northern Africa, going all the way back to Carthage, and this is part of the thing, and you should give me Sicily. And Octavian's like, dude, I'm not giving you crap, because I don't really want you more powerful. You were here basically to keep Antony in check, and you're not supposed to be an opponent of mine. And Lepidus is like, dude, I'm one of the three leading triumvirs that exists. And Octavian's like, we can see about that. And through some rather agile political maneuvering, what ends up happening is that Octavian gets his army to Sicily first. So when Lepidus's army lands and starts trying to take over, Octavian says Lepidus is actually a rebel and is trying to destabilize Rome. So Sextus Pompey is gone, and Octavian uses this option to get rid of Lepidus. So how does this work? Well, Lepidus was in a position called the Pontifex Maximus, which was the highest priest in the Roman world. So Octavian could not kill this guy. But what he could do was banish him. So Lepidus gets declared a enemy of Rome and banished from Italy. But that clearly means that he can't be one of the triumvirs anymore. And now it's just Antony and Octavian. Because Augustus is going to say, oh, well, Lepidus, that guy, he's kind of a jerk and we got rid of him. So I'm going to take all of this land over here now. So it's really kind of the Western Roman world versus the Eastern Roman world. And this is and I've always thought this was a really interesting preface to what Rome would look like much later on in the AD period, where you have this sort of half of the Roman world over here that's aligned in one side, and then this half of the Roman world over here that's aligned in one side, and kind of shadowing the Eastern and the Western Roman world. No spaghetti for you! At least buy him dinner first. No, I can't say that because I'm trying to keep the stream PG. So I know that there might be some younger viewers in the audience, so I will refrain from making off-color and inappropriate jokes. But you may continue to tempt me to do those as much as you would like. Okay, so now it's getting real. And this stuff all goes down, by the way, in 34 and 33 BC. By the time we get to 32 BC, it's pretty clearly going to come to fighting. And Octavian and Antony are going to be at each other's throats. And Antony had started doing some really weird stuff over in Egypt. He had started dressing kind of Egyptian and kind of liked the idea of being worshipped like a pharaoh, and had taken some steps that made it really look like he was sort of trying to be kingly, which of course is a curse word for the Romans. Kings are bad in the Roman world, right? And Caesar, oh gosh, I keep calling him Caesar because that's what people called him at the time. Octavian finds out through a little birdie that whispers in his ear that Antony had modified Antony's will. And the rumor was that Antony had promised to give dominion of certain regions of the Roman world to his wife Cleopatra and his children, in what would clearly be some attempt at establishing a dynasty, a ruling dynasty where he considered himself to own the land. That way he could give it to his children. So Octavian's going to do something very interesting. Antony, all the kids in the marketplace say, wait, yeah, pretty much. Octavian's going to push his way into the temple of Vesta and steal Antony's will. And this was really sketchy stuff to do. But it turns out that when they read the will, Antony had gone weirdo and had promised a lot of this territory to his children and to his wife, which was completely against the way that Rome was supposed to do stuff. And at that point, Octavian takes this stuff to the Senate and says, Antony's trying to be a king. We need to go get him. Antonoi, right? It's like, oh, no, you didn't. And the Senate's like, oh, yeah, he's a king. We can't have that. You are free to go get him. And not only do they say go get him, they take another step of revoking all of Antony's titles and his ability to command Roman troops. So at that point, anybody technically following an order of Antony is going to be breaking the senatorial decree. That man is playing king. He thought we wouldn't notice, but we totally did. Yeah, we totally did. So Antony realizes that his days are numbered. And he and Cleopatra were actually hanging out over here in Greece and decided that they were going to try to sort of provoke a battle earlier than Octavian was ready. Like if they could maybe get the jump on him, they could destabilize him and get over into Italy and take him over. So they had a big fleet, and there's going to be a big naval battle right about here off the shores of Greece. Well, actually, I was a little bit too far north. Let me zoom in a little bit further. That would have been technically Albania. Right around here. And the modern-day city is called Nicopolis, but the ancient battle is at a place called Actium. The Battle of Actium. This is in 31 BC. Big naval battle, and Octavian's forces win out. The fleet of Antony is dashed, and so are his hopes. Your mother was a hamster, and your father smelt of elderberries. Pretty much. And what's really interesting, and I get to put on the adventure hat here, ask your doctor if Actium is right for you. Having problems with rebellious kings from foreign lands, ask your doctor if Actium is right for you. So after the Battle of Actium, several years later, Octavian is going to go back to this location in Greece and build this city called Nicopolis. Once an ancient navy battle, like lots of ships ramming each other with marines on the decks trying to fight each other and take over the ships. Pretty nasty stuff. Lots of hand-to-hand fighting, believe it or not. Imagine bare-knuckle boxing with ships. That's not such a bad metaphor. Anyway, so Caesar's going to go back to this... Gosh, I keep calling him Caesar. Sorry. Octavian is going to go back to this location at Actium, and on the mainland, just across from where the battle was fought on the water, he builds a city called Nicopolis. And I went there. So I have photos. Now, this particular image is let me back up. Is an interesting piece of rocks, or stack of rocks here, and you might not be able to really get very much out of this until I tell you what's going on here. So if you see these particular rocks, they are made in a zigzag. So you have a point here, and it goes down, and it comes back up, and there's a point here, and then it goes down, and then there's a point here, and then it comes down, and there's another point here. So this is actually a victory monument, because what Octavian had them do was pull up the prows of the ships. So that's the front part of the ship, where it kind of comes up at a point. And he had them pull all of these ships up, and that that monument where they came out to points with the rocks, he actually had them mount the prows of all of the ships that he sank at the battle. So that particular monument is at the city of Nicopolis. There was a big sort of covered portico here down at the bottom of the hill, where this big inscription across the front of it that talked about how Caesar Augustus had conquered his foes, and up the hill you could see the prows of the ships. You have to kind of use your imagination, like the front of these ships kind of poking out into the open air up here. Pretty cool imagery going here. Really neat place to go check out. I sank your battleships. Exactly. This is exactly it. I sank your battleship. I got the better of you. I beat you up. And come check out my really cool monument at Nicopolis, which, by the way, means the city of victory. Because he had won the big victory here. Nicopolis is a really neat place, and it's a pretty cool city. Unfortunately, while we were there, a lot of the area was undergoing construction. They were doing some renovation to the theater and had it really shut off, and shut off to the point where you couldn't get in at all. They have a lot of this area kind of like, please don't go over here unless you're being really careful. Not Mycopolis, no, Nicopolis. I should type this stuff down, huh? Render unto Caesar's what is Caesar's, indeed. Nicopolis, the city of victory, like Nike, which is victory, or the goddess of victory, rather. That would be the city of fungi. Hey, Tuna, what's up, man? Everybody, if you are not already, go follow the Tuna. He's a cool guy, and you should go follow him. Anyway, so after this big battle, and you might wonder why Nicopolis and all of this is such a big deal. It's because after Actium, Antony is pretty much done. Antony and Cleopatra flee back to Egypt with Octavian and his army on their heels. Well, I guess technically it would be Octavian and their navy floating around their army. But they get back to Egypt, they get back to Alexandria, and they land and get into their palace. And Octavian is right there behind them. And basically he lays siege to the palace. And the people of Alexandria had actually become so sick of Antony and Cleopatra that when Antony and Cleopatra commit suicide, they sort of hail Octavian as a savior. They're like, thank you for getting rid of those jerk faces. They were so horrible. Making breakfast for dinner. I love breakfast for dinner. That is an underrated a mealtime. And I am also of the opinion that cereal is absolutely dinner if it needs to be. My wife laughs at my ability or my preference sometimes to just eat cereal for dinner. I think it's perfectly logical. So much drama for those Ptolemies. Yeah. But at this point, Antony is gone. Antony and Cleopatra, again, they commit suicide. So now it's just Octavian. And now the real fun starts, because if you thought all of that stuff was the fun part, now you got to figure out how to keep the power. Cereal is a proper meal. Thank you, Mac. I appreciate that. Hail Ceres, the goddess of grain and cereals. A good bowl of frosted mini wheats and a frosty glass of chocolate milk. I have really started becoming a big fan of what I used to call old people cereal. Like when I was a kid, you'd get kid cereal, which was your Cocoa Puffs or your Cinnamon Toast Crunch, which is still the best breakfast cereal ever created. And if you disagree, I'll fight you. Lucky Charms, that kind of stuff. I called that cereal. And adult cereal was like your Raisin Bran, your Honey Bunches of Oats, etc. The stuff that, had fiber and didn't have marshmallows. I don't have a problem with Captain Crunch. I do have a problem when the Captain Crunch gets like it almost needs to sit in the bowl for a little while. Otherwise, it's like chewing fiberglass. I don't have a problem with the taste though. An asp to the breast is not a good way to rule. Yeah, for real. Verna's big fan of the muesli. Nice. You'd eat peanut butter crunch straight out of the box. It's just too. It's too crunchy for me. I don't know. Honey Bunches of Oats makes it glad. Yes, and I have discovered all of those varieties. I've been going through them, and I quite like those. They are filling. They taste good, and they're usually cheap. I can get like 2 boxes for $4. And Fruity Pebbles, I like some Fruity Pebbles. I will say that I'm a little bit more partial to Cocoa Pebbles than I am Fruity Pebbles, but if you were to offer me Pebbles of any sort, I would probably eat them. Cap'n Crunch, the cereal that bites back, indeed. You would also eat raw spaghetti. Oh, man. Now, one thing I did think it was neat to do as a kid was when we cooked spaghetti to get a little stick of spaghetti about, yay long, just, kind of big enough to fit in my mouth. And I would get the raw spaghetti noodle or the uncooked spaghetti noodle, and I would suck on it until it got noodly. And I don't know why that was such a thing for me as a kid, but I did it. So you eat raw ramen, but raw spaghetti is what? Mac, why do you eat raw ramen? I mean, do you eat it like a rice cake? You just kind of just like one little piece, like one little small piece of noodle that, is maybe 2 inches long, or, 5 centimeters long for our friends in Europe. Do you not eat raw ramen? I don't eat raw ramen. No, I'm sorry. You like the flavor of raw spaghetti? You used to walk around with an uncooked noodle. Yes, just like that, KP. Oh, man. What happened to cesarean during this, by the way? During the death? Not during your spaghetti. While I was eating dinner, what happened to cesarean? So in the middle of all of this mess, ramen crunch is a thing. I guess. I don't know. Anyway, so Octavian is going to capture Alexandria in 30 BC. This is after the Battle of Actium in 31. And it is suspected that at that point, Octavian did follow through with his supporters' ideas and have him assassinated. There's kind of a famous statement. One of his supporters was this guy named Didymus. This kind of one of the political supporters that Octavian had. And there's this famous statement where Didymus was like, look, you've got this guy. What are you going to do with this guy? And Octavian's like, I really still don't think I need to kill him. And Didymus says, too many Caesars is not good. Like, we need fewer Caesars. And apparently at that point, Octavian was like, yeah, okay, fine. And we don't really know how he died, but he got killed. He got executed by Octavian or by his supporters. And at that point, Octavian assumed control of Egypt. Literally declared himself ruler of Egypt. Where am I at? Maruchan is garbage cooked. Raw, it's a treat. I don't know. You're thinking about it. I think you taught me that, the uncooked noodle thing. Maybe I did. I've been known to munch on the noodle cube from the ramen packet. Yeah, that's what people are talking about. Like, I've never tried this straight, just crunching ramen noodles. 2 Caesars are too many. Some Romans would argue that this applied to one as well. They would. I imagine the best opportunity to have someone assassinated would be after stating an unwillingness to do so. Yes, and that could have also been part of it. Like, no, I grateful and loving Octavian should not kill this guy. And they're like, but you really should. He's like, okay, because you said so, go kill the guy. At 2 Caesars? You've done that. The Egyptians just ignored me. And then he screwed up the calendar even more. Yeah, because we gotta name we've got to name that 7th month after Julius, July, because that's the month that he was born. So, well, I guess that wouldn't have been the 7th month at that point. Now, March, April, May, June, July. That would have been the 5th month. It would have been the month of Quintus. Anyway, so what is Octavian to do? He is the sole ruler of Egypt. He has control of a unified Roman military. He has more money than he knows what to do with. And what's the next step? Well, the next step is don't do what Caesar did, because Caesar got killed at this point. Octavian goes back to Rome and says, okay, my term is up. I'd like to run for consul. And people are like, wait, what now? He's like, yeah, we need, next time we have elections, I want to run for consul. And they're like, dude, you're going to get it. And he's like, okay, but I still want to run. And they're like, oh, okay. You don't want us to just give it to you? And he's like, no, don't want to do that. No, I'll run for office. And he gets elected consul. Now, he runs for consul multiple times in a row, which was still not really technically Roman law, but had been done so many times at this point that people really weren't caring very much anymore. But in 27 AD, something really important happens. After Octavian had brought peace to the Roman Republic and put down all of the little brush fire wars and reestablished control over the boundaries and kind of made a gift of a lot of money to the Roman world, he's going to give up all of his power. And he lays down his command as consul. He lays down the power of imperium, so his ability to control the military. And he cedes all political and military power back to the Senate and goes, all right, guys, we've brought peace. I'm putting it down. And everybody was like, wait, what? Are you retiring? And he's like, well, I've done what I said I was going to do. I have brought peace to Rome. And it's time for Rome to decide which way that Rome wants to go. April Fools? No, for real. What a bro. Indeed. This is like the good guy bro. Not the goofy bro with the weird hat thing. Only the true son of Caesar would deny his own divinity. Kind of, sort of. But man, does this make people love him even more. Because that's what a Roman's supposed to do. You handle business, and then when business is handled, you step back and you say, now it's time for the people to decide what they want to happen. Imagine tripping on the way to the retirement villa and then dying before you can lean back and relax. Oh, man. Mission accomplished. Exactly, but instead of saying that from the deck of an aircraft carrier and then continuing a war for the rest of your presidency, he actually did bring peace to Rome. Rome chooses to collapse. Well, yeah, it does, but 476 years later in the West, and, well, no, I guess it would be longer than that. It would be 503 years later in the West, and then 1479 years in the East. Because Rome in the West falls in 476. The Byzantine Empire lasts until 1453. So it has a pretty good run. Let's not forget that America hasn't even hit 300 yet. Just saying. I'd say that's not our boy Octavian. No, Octavian is done, and he's like, okay, I've done what I needed to do. I'm laying down all the power. You guys get to decide what's next. And they go, oh man, that's amazing. And the Senate gets together, and let's remind ourselves, the Senate at this point was full of Julius Caesar supporters. It's time for a name change. Augustus. Which brings us to the pun title tonight, Augustus and everything after. I don't know how many of you get that pun. I don't know how many of you all listened to as much music in the 90s as I did and know that. I'll give you a hint. It is the name of an album from the 90s. We still haven't hit 250, but we will in 5 more years, right? I remember when I was 200. Oh, Vern, not so long ago. That's rule number 3. Number 1, never get involved in land war of Asia. Number 2, never go against the Sicilian when the death is on the line. Number 3, when Venice is handled, step back. Right? So, Augustus, he gets a new name. Now, Augustus is a title, and the Senate votes to give him this title. If Octavius is for us, who can stand Augustus? Hey, Viscera got it. Look at there. Look at there. Yep. So now we get to talk about Augustus and everything after. Which, by the way, was a great April Fool's Day thing. The Counting Crows today posted an April Fool's thing where they had taken the cover for August and everything after and changed it to March and everything after, and said that they're releasing a new album about pandemic stuff, which I thought was pretty cute. Metrand. I'm Spartacus. Let's see those Spartaci. I'm Spartacus. Metrand, thank you so much for that subscription. Welcome to the adventure. And you get celebrated by Spartacus busts. I am Spartacus. Good times. Thank you so much, Metron. I appreciate that. So, Augustus is a religious title. And it is worthy of worship or worthy one. And the only power at this point that Augustus did not lay down was his religious power. And he's a big fan of the Roman religion. It's 3:36 a.m. here in Sweden, and you've given me plenty of laughs. You rarely subscribed, but you felt it was right. Oh, Metran, many thanks, my friend. I'm glad that people can talk about history and have a good time. I really feel like history gets a bad reputation for being boring, and I'm glad that you're here with us, and I hope that you're able to come back. I hope that whatever has you awake at 3:36 in the morning is not a bad scenario. I hope you're doing well. You got your first vaccine today, woo! And you're afraid you get in front of line and say April Fools. Oh yeah, well, congrats on the first one. He's a god. Of course he would be pro-religion. Indeed, he'd be pro-religion. Big deal, this. So, as a fair note, Lepidus is still alive, by the way. Lepidus dies in 12 BC, so this is a little bit ahead of the time. Augustus could have, if he wanted to, kicked Lepidus out of the position of Pontifex Maximus. He decided not to, though. He was going to wait until Lepidus died. And then when Lepidus died in 12 BC, Augustus was like, I think I would like to run for Pontifex Maximus. And people were like, it's yours, dude. Take it. And he's like, nope. I want to run for it. I want to be elected to it. And he gets elected Pontifex Maximus. So we'll talk about religious reform in a little bit. So how does he continue to be powerful? Here's the idea. It's because he keeps getting stuff given to him. he does not ask for stuff. First off, the people inside of the Senate, so here's how it worked. When you got certain ranks within the Roman world, like you were able to obtain certain political positions, like if you got elected consul, you were eligible at that point to join the Senate. So Augustus, now that he's called Augustus, and I can call him Augustus, after laying down all of his power, asked to apply for a Senate position and got into the Senate, but he did it the right way. He went through the procedure and asked, would you consider me for a senatorial position? When one opened, he got into the Senate. So when he was in the Senate, the people in the Senate were like, this guy, he's such a guy. He's the good old man. He's the guy. And they gave him another title, which was called Princeps. And technically it says Princeps Senatus. Prince of the Senate. Now, what does that mean? Basically, it gave him the ability to speak first. So when the Senate decided to debate something, Augustus got to be the first word on everything. And because of his kind of political gravity, when he spoke first, that's what happened. So let's just be real. There were people that would speak after him, and he rarely ever had universal support in the Senate. But because he got to speak first, he got his way all the time. The senator formerly known as Prince. There was purple toga. Maybe not purple rain, but if you were in the senatorial class, you got to wear a purple hemmed toga. So purple rain spelled with an E-I-G-N. Purple rain. Yeah. There we go. So if he loses the position, will he be Augustus, formerly known as Princeps? Imagine being against Augustus. Indeed. Like, imagine being the guy that's like, I'll show that guy. I'll talk second and convince everybody. Mind equals blown. Oh, Cave. I love you, man. So he doesn't have an elected position, right? He gets these titles that are given to him that give him authority. And when things hit hiccups, for example, there were some problems getting some legislation passed through the plebeian assemblies. There were some of the stuff that Augustus wanted to pass that he thought would be easier to pass through the plebeian assemblies instead of through the kind of more fuddy-duddy, higher optimates kind of stuff in the Senate. And he was like, man, this would be... There's been hiccups in the Roman Senate. Yeah, and murders. Go figure, right? So he would make these statements like, I could fix this problem if I only had the authority that tribunes had. Remember, tribunes, or if you don't know, tribunes were positions that represented plebeians, and they had certain powers, including veto power. And when he said that, the plebeian assembly was like, dude, do you want to run for tribune? And he's like, I don't want to necessarily run for tribune because I can't. I am a patrician, so I can't run for tribune. And they're like, dude, we would elect you anyway. And he's like, no. The law says I can't run for tribune. It would just be nice if I had tribune powers and I could help you all do this stuff. And they go, what if we voted to give you tribune powers? And he's like, if that's what you want to do. So they vote and give him the powers of a tribune. But he's not a tribune. Then there's some trouble with some military stuff. There's some trouble over in Spain. And he'd be like, man, that would be really great if I held Imperium. I could handle this military stuff. And they're like, dude, you wanna go and handle this? We'll make it up, and you can go lead the army. And he actually does this a little bit. He actually does go lead some armies, but he always comes back and then gives up his command. And they go, look, dude, if you want to go lead an army, we should just make it to where you can go lead an army whenever you want to. And he's like, well, only people that are elected officials have Imperium. I don't necessarily, I don't have Imperium. And they're like, what if we just voted to give you Imperium for life? And he's like, if that's what you all want to do. So they vote to give him Imperium. So then there are some problems with the tax records and how to handle taxes and who should go up and down in the social classes and who should be members of the Senate and who shouldn't be. And he's like, I could probably fix that. And they're like, oh, dude, you should totally fix that. And he's like, well, I don't have the power of a censor. And they're like, you should run for censor. And he's like, I don't really want to run for these positions. Okay, maybe I'll run once or twice. And so he's a censor every now and then. But they're like, dude, you should totally just fix all of this stuff all the time. And he's like, I don't want to do that because only elected officials have that power. And they're like, what if we gave you the power of a censor? And he's like, if that's what the people want, I won't say no. By the end of all of this mess, basically Augustus has the ability to speak first in the Senate. He's the head of the entire Roman religion. He has the power of all of the elected officials, from the lowest level of aedile to the highest level of consul. He gets the power of those positions without having to stand in those positions. He's only consul 2 more times in the rest of his life, in 5 and 2. And he's only consul at that point because he wanted to be consul when his kids came into the government and sort of shepherd them in as consul. But otherwise, he doesn't hold any actual political position. He just has all the power. And he did not take the power. They gave him the power. Are they just making up roles now to give him stuff? No, these were all actual positions. Tribune powers activate, form of the Imperium. Yeah, this is absolutely big brain stuff. If it's the will of the people, right, just become dictator already. No. They offer him dictator powers multiple times, and he flatly refuses them every time. He goes, I am not a dictator. I don't want to be a dictator. I don't want that. That is not my position. He's the roles enough for them to want it more, and then stops until they freely give it to him. Yes, this is exactly the level of manipulation that Augustus is good at. He fixes things, and then when his term is up, he gives it over to somebody else who doesn't do as good of a job, and then they're like, dude, why can't we get Augustus back in here and do this? And he's like, Not my job, man. The people elected this guy. I respect the people's wishes. He's a trickster god. A dictator has responsibilities, but just the power of a dictator, bingo. That's it. You want the power and not the position. So when Augustus gets all of this stuff, he is the first real emperor of Rome. Julius Caesar was not an emperor. He never made it this far. He got sidetracked with the glory and the fast track and basically demanded the power up front. And then when it was given to him, people resented him for it. Augustus watched that happen as a young man and recognized that the real power is the power that's offered to you, not the power that you take. And so he did what Julius Caesar could not do, and he united the empire behind him. And let us remember, during this period of time where Augustus is literally the guy in charge, the operation of Rome is still going on. They're still electing consuls. They're still electing aediles and quaestors and praetors. They're still operating with censors that are bringing in tax records. All of the pieces of Rome are still moving in the background. Augustus had just gamed the system. Which brings us to Augustus. Full-blown man, full-blown powerhouse, son of the divine, first of the Senate, powers of all of the Roman officials, Pontifex Maximus, holder of Imperium. This is, by the way, Augustus as an adult. Still no beard, though. Yeah, he's a clean-shaven guy. If you take by force, you give others more ground for doing the same. If you have the power given, anyone who tries to take it from you is in the wrong. Bingo. Exactly. And I'm wearing the adventure hat again because that particular statue is in the National History Museum of Athens, and I got to go see that statue. So there we go. A bit of a dweeb from the look of things. Hey, Junk, what's up, man? Welcome. And just all around bro. Fiber optic field trip. There we go, right? So the Athens Natural Archaeological Museum is a brilliant museum. I could have spent all day there. I think I spent more time than Mac wanted to spend there, and I could have spent more. Yeah, we mentioned his dweeb look when we saw it. We actually did. Like, he doesn't look that impressive. I should have taken that sip while I was showing you the photo. Okay, so what does Augustus do with all this power? It's going, you got a bowl of ramen, a glass of rum, and a lecture to listen to. Reminds you of college. Well, I hope that you don't view this as a lecture, more of a conversation that is guided by someone with a whole bunch of random knowledge. Because I don't know if your college professors would have been interested in you making fart jokes in class. Maybe not, though. Have you ever met an impressive-looking Octavian? I've never actually met anyone named Octavian in real life. It's a lecture. I prefer to call them guided discussions. They're lectures, probably. Anyway, so what are we to do with all of this power? First thing, let's add a whole bunch of territory to the empire. So we're going to look at a map. Your brother's dog is named Octavian. Is it after Octavian Augustus? If so, that's a wicked cool name. Julius is the other. Oh, okay, yeah. I like your brother's taste. All right, so let's look at this map. And you're like, I knew we were going to look at a map, because how the heck were we going to get through a whole stream without Shane showing us a map? Yeah. Okay, so fair note, this is in Italian, but it's the best map that I found. So if we look here in the yellow, we have Roman territory prior to 31 AD. So this is what was Rome before the Battle of Actium. No, your history professor didn't appreciate fart jokes in class. Not enough time. 1-on-1. They were fine, though. Yeah, that's the way most of them are. I try to not mind fart jokes in mine, but, you know, there are limits. You've heard Augustus used as an example of how Roman sculpture was more realistic where Greek was more idealistic. Exactly. That is a great point, Tuna. Romans were a lot more interested in actually catching likeness. The Greeks were a lot more of a fan of golden ratios, the ratio of phi, what's it, 1 to 1.61 or something like that. And idealizing looks because that's what you were supposed to see. Okay, so the yellow is Rome prior to Augustus. If we look at this dark green color here, this is land that he added himself from 31 to 19. So if we'll note, all of Egypt and a large chunk of what would have been Ptolemaic northern Africa gets added. This is when he takes over Egypt. He adds this directly to Rome almost as a gift. You would prefer to be an ancient Greek statue of me? Your beard would be more impressive. There's a lot of fighting over here. in what is Pamphylia and Galatia, and this region gets added, and a lot of this area over here, which would have been part of Armenia at the time, becomes a vassal. A lot of the parts that used to be the old Pontic kingdom over here in Crimea were added as vassals. Thrace was added as a vassal. You see big gains here between 19 and 9 BC. There's a lot of fighting that goes on in this region right here. We're adding Germania. We're adding northern Spain. Now, it should be noted that right around in here, the region of Noricum and Pannonia, especially this region kind of right around in here, which was Germania, Augustus is going to have some trouble. And he had wanted to conquer all of Germania, but wasn't able to do so. There were some pretty rough competitions going on out here. So he actually does get beat pretty significantly up in this region. But all of this green stuff is territory that he adds. And that by itself represents what would today be billions of dollars of income to the Roman world, especially the stuff down here in Egypt. This was huge to add to the Roman world. So he is literally expanding Rome. Now, he's also going to get a lot of that under his direct control, because all of that stuff out in the east is going to be very, very new, and is going to be what the Senate becomes kind of fond of referring to as troublesome provinces, because there was so much fighting out there. And the Senate decided that Augustus should be the ruler of all of the troublesome provinces for the period of 10 years. And he's like, I don't like this idea of taking a governorship for 10 years. And they're like, you should just do it. We're going to give it to you. And he's like, well, if that's what you want to do. So he reluctantly takes Syria, Cilicia, Egypt, Cyprus, that territory that's in the central part of Turkey. And he's going to directly rule that for about a decade. Why were the Germans able to fight off what others couldn't? Part of it was the nature of the Germanic peoples. They were still semi-nomadic, and when Augustus invaded, they didn't have big cities for him to target. They would just run away in front of him, and it's hard to pin down people that are able to move. And the further they ran back into Germania, the further he had to pursue them into enemy territory. And they figured out pretty quickly that they could basically outlast him by staying mobile. Because the Roman army was this, big, cumbersome bunch of people that had to be fed and had to be supplied, and supply lines had to run all the way back into the Roman territory and had to be protected and kept there. The Roman military also had to be paid. The longer you had these soldiers out in the field, the more money it was going to cost. And so the Germans would basically play guerrilla warfare and try really hard not to get pinned down in big, decisive conflicts, because they had the ability to do that. Those barbarians, indeed, Augustus, take that city. City runs away, pretty much. This sounds familiar, yeah. It's a pretty familiar tactic that a lot of semi-nomadic people fall back on. So there's all of this territory added. Augustus also decides that he wants to crack down on what he called morality issues, because he thought that the Roman world had become immoral. And we're like, really? With all of the mass murdering and assassination and backstabbing and literal backstabbing, immoral? No. But yes. Did they tell this story in Afghanistan?
Friends,
Romans.
countrymen, lend me your ears. I come to bury Caesar, not to praise him.
Who would praise Caesar? Lots of people. Because he's a god now. Thanks, Ethan. Welcome, man. I feel like they have told this. Yeah, pretty much. So, this morality. We need to fix the morality of Rome, because things had become just too nasty. And one of the things that he passes are laws that crack down on corruption. So bribing, trying to rig elections or cheat your way into elections or holding positions longer than you're supposed to. He's going to pass a lot of laws that really crack down on that. And this is going to be held as him being a good Roman, because when it was time for his power to be put down, he always put down his power. And when it came time for his duties to end, he always gave his duties back over. So he was making this case that he was very serious about that. So it was okay if he passed laws that would really crack down on people staying in positions too long, holding on to power for too long, running in military circles too long, because he was being the good example that he wanted to set for everybody else. Political morality, yeah. Because he was above reproach, he was able to keep other people from challenging him by being unreproachful or reproachful. He was a perfect example, so you could not get at him by being anything but perfect yourself, and he could out-perfect you all day long. Another thing, he really starts to crack down on adultery. And he thinks that adultery is bad for the Roman system because a lot of the marriages were made in front of the gods. And if you're running around on your marriage, this is bad. And he passed some laws that are going to target adulterers. And this is pretty clearly something that he was using as a weapon against his political enemies. Because here's the thing about Roman politicians, all of them slept around. They were all adulterers. And so if somebody was coming at him and he found out that they were coming after him and he goes, somebody find out when the last time this guy went to the brothel. Well, guess what? Now that guy's in exile because he broke the law on adultery. Juno be praised. Indeed. This one kind of bites him in the butt though, because his own daughter gets busted for adultery, and they're like, okay, Augustus, I know like you put a whole bunch of people in bad straits and you kicked a lot of people out of office, but like, dude, this is your daughter. We would be okay if you didn't like come down, bring the hammer down on her. He's like, oh heck no, she's exiled, kick her out. So his own daughter gets exiled to an island off the coast of Italy because he's like, nope, the law applies across the board. And they were like, man, this Augustus guy, that dude, he's not doing the nepotism thing. Like this he's the real deal. He really means this stuff. It should also be noted that his daughters, and to a certain extent also his sisters, political affairs had started causing him to be shamed a little bit. Like everybody kind of knew that all of this shenanigan stuff was going on. So getting rid of some family members and saving political face at the same time was kind of actually a thing that he probably wanted to do. You got to play the game the right way. So morality. Also, religious changes. Here's some big stuff. Remember I said that he was a really big thing on religion. He is going to begin to reinforce the proper way of doing things. You had to do the ceremonies the right way. You had to honor the gods on the right days. You had to perform the rituals the right way. The priesthoods had to be filled the right way. And the people in the positions of the priests had to do the right thing. And the temples that had been damaged or been pillaged needed to be rebuilt. And we're also going to build new stuff. And I've got some photos of stuff that he built, including a really cool thing that you can still go see today here, called the Ara Pacis. The altar of Pax, the altar of peace. This is built right around the Roman religious center of the city. These scenes that you see here are of both important religious things, but also, yes, Pax's Peace. Some pretty important scenes in both religious history, but also his own life, and some scenes of Roman history. But this is a big altar to peace, which was sort of deified in the figure of Pax. And this is also going to be a period of time that starts something that we call the Pax Romana, or the peace of the Romans, because when Augustus does all of this stuff, he fixes a lot of the problems. But you can go see this today, and this thing is pretty big, by the way. So there are cars over here in the corner that you can kind of compare this to. So it's a big honking thing. But another thing. Nope. Oh, sorry. Here we are. This pile of rocks. And you're like, why are you showing me a pile of rocks? Well, I'm showing you a pile of rocks for one important reason. By the way, these right here are the columns of the Parthenon. This is on top of the Acropolis in Athens. And as a note, I am once again wearing the adventure hat. And you can see adventure hat. So what is this thing? Well, this is a temple that had been built to honor the deified Julius Caesar. And one of the things that Augustus does when he takes over as religious leader is really start pushing this whole Caesar was a god thing. And on top of the Acropolis, this is in Athens, the Parthenon is right here, the big famous building, Parthenon, that is right here beside Verne's name. If you click on the little badge there, you can see the subscription badge of the Parthenon. That is dedicated to Caesar. And one of the things that the Romans liked to do is pair up their deities, and they would have like married pairs. And the ordered pair that Augustus put Caesar with was the goddess Roma, what we call the genius or the deified personage of Rome. So you would go to these temples and you would make sacrifices to Rome as a location, but also to Julius Caesar, who, by the way, was his father and also a god. He's son of the divine, right? So he really starts leaning on this religion thing. Lots of religious changes, like Columbia. Indeed, there were very frequently geniuses of cities. The puppy is outside woofing at something. I don't know at what she is woofing, but who knows? There's probably some poor woodland creature out in the backyard. Oh, puppy. He also fixes the infrastructure. One of the things that he does is overhauls the way that Roman roads get built. There was a whole kind of bureaucratic system that decided how and where and when to fund and build roads. He overhauled all of that and started building more roads. There are several big roads that get built during his time that run through various parts of the empire. He also builds bridges, rebuilds buildings, does a lot of work in the infrastructure of Rome. And it should be noted that he pays for a lot of this stuff out of his own pocket. At various points in time, when Rome is a bit low on cash, he'll just donate money to Rome. And we're not talking about like, I give $5 or I would like to round up my groceries to the nearest dollar for whatever generous cause. He's donating billions of dollars to Rome just to fix stuff up. So you just do your thing, man, and I'll pay for it. Let's go build some roads and bridges and overhaul some stuff, and I got this, Rome. Don't worry about it. And people are like, oh, that Augustus guy, that he's a gem. So military reforms, these are the big ones too. he is going to start making government contract work. So this is one of the first organized military industrial complexes. The government of Rome decides under his direction that they are going to start supplying the military with armor and weapons and standardize all of the armor and weapons that the Roman soldiers use, the better to train them with, right? You could combine multiple armies that way, and everybody would have the same the same sword, the same helmet, the same breastplate, the same, shields, the same pikes, everything across the board. But to do that, you need people capable of making all of these, standardized things. So he made government contracts and started giving them out. And this was a lot of money being thrown around. And some of the people that got these big government contracts made a ton of money. But this also helps the military because this alleviated the need of soldiers to supply their own materials, but it also made it easier for Rome to keep up with who had what, right? Also, there are going to be changes on the oldest age that you can stay in the military and the youngest age at which you can join the military, and the duration of your term of service is going to get changed. He actually lowers it a pretty good amount. And one of the things that he's going to start doing is demobilizing a lot of the military. Again, Rome had been at war for almost 200 straight years. And he decides that he needs to shrink the size of the Roman military significantly. He basically retires with benefits whole legions of soldiers. So somewhere in the tune of 30,000 or so soldiers, which was about 5 or 6 legions, get settled out in the Roman East, especially out in these provinces that are considered his troubled provinces that he's ruling directly. And whole cities get created as veteran colonies where these people that had fought and served their term in the Roman military get settled down with land and with stipend and everything they needed, honorably discharged and allowed to convert themselves to good old-fashioned farmers. But these people are going to be indebted to Augustus because he was the one that made all of this stuff happen. So this guy, Augustus, we have retirement homes, they had retirement towns. And what's neat about some of this stuff is that some of the towns had actually grown up around the camps themselves. Roman military camps were standard and set places most of the time. And just outside of these gates, you would have little villages that would spring up where local people would trade with the Roman soldiers. Also where Roman soldiers' wives and babies would live, because you weren't supposed to be married when you were in the military and you weren't supposed to have kids when you were in the military. But everybody did. If they, you find a nice local girl, you have a kid with them, they go live in the village outside of the wall. When you get your pay, you give it to them. Everybody knew that this kind of stuff was going on. But when these people got retired, they might retire them to that village. So there'd be the military camp right there. And this village would now be a city full of Roman veterans. So this puts a lot of people into troubled spots that are loyal to you, that can still fight if they need to. Roman veterans were retiring when they, were still of fighting capability, usually in their late 30s. So they still had some kick around in them if they needed to. So if this area got invaded, you have this whole city full of veterans that could form up at a moment's notice and go off and kick some raiders' butt if they needed to. But Augustus did all of this by himself, and he did it the right way. And that's why he succeeded when Caesar didn't. He was one of the most important Romans and probably one of the most important people that has ever lived on earth. And the Roman Empire is very much his creation. The model that he made is going to last for the next 200 plus years. which is impressive. Now, later emperors will tweak things and change things, and by the time you get to the late 100s or so, there's going to be a pretty big shift away from his political organization to a more military mindset. But that has a lot to do with the challenges that the Roman Empire was facing at the time, especially with invasions from the east and from barbarians. Hey, Techman. Await the chapter where the space fleet travels back to form the Romulan Star Empire in the Beta Quadrant. That might be a special episode, Techman. Maybe sometime in the future. I don't know. Do they have warbirds, or was it birds of prey? I can't remember all of my Star Trek ship names. Is it Romulan Bird of Prey? Is that the name of the ship? I can't remember. I apologize. All right, ladies and gents. So that is all for me today. And I know that we went long, but I knew that this one was going to run long because, well, just to be honest, I could have talked another 3 or 4 hours about Augustus and not repeated myself. I skipped over a lot of stuff. It's a bird of prey. Okay, I thought so. It was something like that. I knew it was something in that world. Okay, so birds of prey were from the Klingons. There we go. Oh, Viscera, thank you. Thanks to everybody for hanging out. Before we go, does anybody have any sort of channel points that you want to redeem? Any questions you want to ask? Anything? And I know we've been going on long, and you all might be tired of listening to me talk, and that's okay if you are. By all means. It's great fun. You'll try to catch streams in the future as well. Time zones are a bit of a mess. Yeah, I understand. I appreciate you hanging out for as long as you were able to, Metran. You enjoy vanilla bean ice cream. I do enjoy vanilla bean ice cream. I love a good vanilla ice cream. I think that it is unfair to use vanilla to mean plain. So, Romulan bird of prey and Klingon bird of prey. So they're both the bird of prey, but they're different ship sides? Or angles? What's wrong, babe? You'll hardly touch your... Oh, I hate you, Moose. That's horrible. I'd still eat it. I'd just spit all the beans out. All right, everybody. Seriously, any questions? Any last minute redemptions of anything? Anybody have any questions about the material or just life or sharing horrible memes? Oh man, that was just wrong. All right, everybody. Well, anything about my favorite time in history? This is my favorite time in history, Metran. A random fact about this period of time. One of the things that Augustus changed specifically was how the system of exile worked. And there were several laws that he passed that created distinctions between exile. And you got kicks. So you could be expelled. You could be exiled permanently, or so there were variations in here, and it went back to him. And I could talk about that for an hour straight, because that's what I did my master's thesis on, was the evolution of banishment and exile in the Roman Empire as opposed to the Roman Republic. So, right, there were levels. You could get exiled and kicked out of Rome totally and lose your citizenship. You could get banned from being inside Italy or Rome, or you could just get stuck on an island for a while, with the understanding that you could come back after a certain period of time. Yes, note the frequency of the adventure hat. Yes. All right, everybody. If there is nothing else, I think we're going to go do a raid. We are going to go raid Serena Malion, who is an excellent painter and very nice individual who has just started streaming. We're going to show her some love, and I hope you all enjoy her channel. She is maybe known to you all as the artist on the Mouse Guard alphabet book, but she is currently doing some Bloodborne fan art, which I love Bloodborne. So we're going to go raid Serena. Our battle call is adventure with lots of exclamations, and throw as many of those wonderful adventure hats in the chat as you can. Hang around a little bit, give Serena some love. And I will see you all next time on Tuesday, and we will be doing a viewer request stream on the history of archaeology, which I'm very excited about. So see you all next time. Have a good one.